Thank you. Clicker. There we go. Well, good morning. How is everybody doing? If you haven't downloaded that app now, it might be a little bit too late to download that app. So as she said, my name is Sandy Carter, and I've been with AWS for about 5 years. I started in the service team area, driving our enterprise workload business, and now I'm helping out with the partners here at Public Sector. I'm really thrilled that you guys chose to come to this session because I think it's probably one of the most important areas around data. So let's go ahead and get started. And I want to start out with something a little bit funny. I don't know how many of you have an organization that looks like this. I know that I've worked at companies that kind of work like this, but I do know that innovation is so important. There was a recent study that was done that showed CEOs said that 93% of them, that innovation is the way that they're going to unlock customer value for the next long-term future. I don't know what the other 7% said, but those 93% were definitely right. The unfortunate thing is that 98% of them said that they didn't feel like their organization was ready to unlock innovation because they didn't have a strong data strategy. And so to unlock innovation, we strongly believe that you need a great data strategy as well. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to first kind of outline why I think data is so important. I know you're here, so I know that you're believers, but I want to make this deck also available for you if you need help inside of your organization. So The Economist declared that data is the most important strategic asset in your business. I really like to say that data is the soil from which everything else grows. So think about all your real-time decision making. Think about how you're going to do your machine learning strategy. You have to have data for that. Think about how you're going to visualize data to share with your board or or the folks that you have to report into. All of that data is so crucial. And everything else really does grow up from data if you think about it, almost every decision that you make. So data is a strategic asset, and so one of the first things I do want you to take away is that data is that strategic asset because it has gravity. Now, why does it have gravity? Well, once you migrate that data to the cloud, in a lot of cases, in fact, today I've got some fabulous folks who are going to talk with me. They're going to show you that when you migrate that data to the cloud, a lot of time the number of data sources that you have grows as well, which is really interesting because it had been stored before in Excel spreadsheets or in someone's mind. So once you start that data strategy, migrating that data to the cloud, you increase your data sources, which makes your decision making much stronger. There are a lot of other benefits for moving that data to the cloud too, around cost of that data, how you manage and protect that data. So during COVID, we had several customers who figured out, big organizations, big countries, who figured out that their most valuable data was sitting in an Excel spreadsheet or was sitting in someone's head. And those new insights that you're going to get are also really important. So we'll talk about a data lake and how that helps you drive. But more importantly, once you get the data into a data lake, how you can use and leverage analytics, machine learning as you move forward. Acceleration of that innovation too, we're also seeing an explosion of IoT, Internet of Things. People putting more and more sensors on almost everything, from people to tires to drones, to gather more information, in particular because all of us are so excited to be here in person. Think about how many things had to get done, and they couldn't get done by people because we couldn't go out and collaborate like before. A lot of growth in sensors, or IoT, really occurred because of COVID. So you see we've got this flywheel going around that data. And then I'll just do one more chart on the importance of data. And the reason I do this, I do a lot of EBCs. I'm from Seattle, so I get to do a lot of executive briefings. And I have to spend a lot of time with executives explaining why data is so important. And I love this. This is the latest study from IDG. It just came out this year. And what I like about it is that it showcases the progression and how you could get left behind if you're not focused on your data. So in the first set of graphs there, you'll see that it talks about 86% have already deployed a data strategy. Now, why is that? Data, usually, you can do it in a small pilot, has a lot of velocity, and you can experiment fast and easy to prove results to justify a bigger project. You'll also see that IDG found that on average, once companies start with a data project, they see value in it, and they're spending on average about $11 million on those data projects that they're working on. So they're starting small, 86% has already started, and then they're progressing up as they find success with that experiment. 61% of people said that the pandemic accelerated the use of data, and we saw this all over the world. We had countries call us saying, you know what, I need to get my masks to the right places. So I've got too many masks here, I don't have any masks here, can you help us with that kind of supply chain problem throughout our country? Well, if you don't have the data to know where you have masks, where you don't have masks, where you have the need, you really can't execute. So many places, especially in public sector, realized through the pandemic that data was even more needed than ever before. And the last is really, I think, a funny one. It's 57% or more enthusiastic now to work with data. And if you read the report, that enthusiasm has come from what they see as so many different business decisions being unlocked because now they have data. So this is just another reason why you can really build a strong business case for really focusing on data. Now, one of the really important takeaways, so we already talked about data as a strategic asset, takeaway number one. Takeaway number two is that you really need to build a data strategy. Now, everybody has a business strategy, right? If you guys raise your hands, you all have, yeah, okay, so everybody has a business strategy. I'm an adjunct professor at Carnegie Mellon, and we just did a major piece of research, and we found that the most innovative companies not only have a business strategy, but they also have a data strategy. So I won't ask you how many people have a data strategy, because usually very few people raise their hands. But we do believe that this is one piece of success, that you have a business strategy that is backed up by a data strategy. Because the business strategy really sets the goals and the requirements for what you're going to do with your data, should guide what you do in your data. But then based on the data, your business strategy should also adjust because you need more information. So 5 years ago when I came to AWS, one of the biggest things I was surprised about is how much data Amazon has to run their businesses. Tremendous amounts of data. And it's available at every level in the organization through dashboards, visualization, machine learning. I do think it is a secret to the success of Amazon's innovation, is having all of this data and a very structured data strategy. Now, we're not perfect, trust me. I send notes every day going, I need to see this and I need to see it in one place. There's so many places that we can improve. But because we have that data, it really enables us to innovate much more quickly because we know things about you, our customers, and what else we need to provide to you. In fact, because we have the data, we know that 90% of our innovations in our offerings and our services comes from you. And we know that because we track what you tell us you need, we analyze it, we look at what goes into our offerings, and so we know that 90% of our roadmap is driven from your ideas. Pretty cool, right? Innovating from your customers' ideas and thoughts. Now, I used to stop here, but the number one question that I would get is when you want to define that data strategy, what is in that data strategy? What are the elements of it? So I had made the assumption that people knew. I'm going to go through a very high-level view of what that data strategy is. There are a couple of great presentations that go much deeper just in defining the data strategy. We could spend a whole hour just on how to define the data strategy. But again, if you have these two key takeaways in your mind, data is a strategic asset. So just like you manage your, the life cycle of your own products and your own portfolio, you're going to do that for your data. And that you need a data strategy. If you have those two things in mind, that will help you progress significantly just right there. So what are some of the elements of that data strategy? So first, you have to have goals for your data strategy. And those goals need to sync. We just talked about that interlock with that business strategy. So those data goals need to be in concert with what you're doing in your business. So for example, like AWS, if you know that you want to work backwards from your customer, and you know you want to listen to your customer, then you've got to have a way to collect that data about what your customer wants. And so that's a business goal that's driving a need for what you have to do in your data for your company. The next thing you have to do is figure out where those data sources exist. And as we worked with hundreds of companies and organizations, agencies, and countries over COVID, this was a really difficult problem, and people were hustling to do this at the last minute. So if you know your business goals, then you can identify where the sources of that data lives. And then if you know that, you'll also identify some of your gaps, other things about the plan that you need to work on or help facilitate. Of course, you need to do a technology assessment. Do you want to use a data lake? Do you want to use a data warehouse? How are you going to secure that data? And there may be different levels of security for different types of data, and particularly very important for public sector. Then part of your data strategy is to analyze, now that you know the types of data that you need, the quantity of data that you need. So if I was going to do a survey and I said I surveyed one person, that would not be valid. The same is true for data when you build a machine learning strategy. If you only have one source of data, you may not have enough data. And then, of course, the quality of data. This is also where we had a lot of breakdown during COVID. People thought they had data. They thought they had a source of the data. They thought they had enough data. But it turned out that the data was old or not usable or not really applicable. And then, of course, you lay out your implementation plan. So this is very high level. As I said, if you are interested in diving deeper into what makes a best practice data strategy plan, we have lots of examples. We have a white paper. We have presentations around it as well that we can get you and help you out too. So make sure you're thinking about that data strategy. Now, if you're going to do a data strategy, I sit on the World Economic Forum. One of the pieces of research that we recently did was one of the brand new roles that are critical in this new world of data, and that's a data strategist. So there are data scientists. You guys know your data scientists. They're pretty technical. They can manipulate and get to the data. But a data strategist is a new role that really didn't exist about 5 years ago, but is an essential if you're going to be a data-run organization. So in AWS, we actually have this as a job title. We have data strategist. And what does a data strategist do? Well, they look to help shape a business strategy and ensure that you have the data behind it to support that strategy. They also look at all those sources of data and come up with new ideas for data. So for example, we were working on a project at AWS. We knew what data we needed. We didn't have enough data there, so we made a two-pronged strategy to go out and get more data using some sensor data that we needed. And we also decided to buy some data. So there are also places that you can buy data from to supplement while you build your own set of data and your own data lake. So these are some of the things that a data strategist does. I was out searching last night on some of the job boards, and there are many companies now, not enough, but many companies who have this as a role that they're listed out there for their company. So as you're thinking about this, one of the interesting things that occurs to me, and I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but we do a lot of EBCs, and a lot of times what the EBC, what they do is they come in and the executive will say, I want to talk about machine learning. And we'll say, well, if you're going to talk about machine learning, we first want to talk about your data strategy. it's really hard a lot of times to get people to talk about the data until we start giving some illustrations about why the data is also essential for the machine learning models. So again, we're looking at that data quality, quantity, and that data source. So this is one of the illustrations I use, and people usually laugh until they figure out that maybe they're doing the same thing in their company. So let me share it with you. So these are two sumo wrestlers, right? We worked with a couple of universities, and we input 11 million romance novels into our data lake. That was the content that we had. So 11 million romance novels. So if you think about it, we had good data quantity, right? I mean, 11 million romance novels. I guess the source was good because I don't know how you judge a romance novel, but the source was good. And then the quality of the data was good, but was it the right source and the right quality for this particular problem? What we were trying to do is train the machine learning model to identify and create a story from this picture. So now remember, 11 million books, romance novels went in. So this is the generated story it did. He was a shirtless man, and in the back of my mind, I let out a curse as he leaned over to kiss me on the shoulder. So everybody laughs until they realize, oh my gosh, I'm doing this in my own business. I'll give you some examples. One company wanted to build a machine learning model, and they wanted it to define some of their new offerings around the world. But all the data they had was from the US. And so they input that data, and what came out? All requirements for a US market. And so as their board was looking and questioning, they missed the market for Asia Pacific, for Japan, for Latin America, for Canada, because the requirements were different. And so I use this as a funny way to illustrate, because everybody gets it, and then they realize that, oh, they might be doing this in their own business. And it's really important that you get the right data source, the right data quality, and the right data quantity as well. So one of the areas that we really saw accelerate during COVID was the use of IoT. IDC says that more organizations, countries, companies leverage data from IoT sensors than in the past, pre-COVID era. So 4 times the data. And we saw it come in from every industry, healthcare, DoD, agencies, countries, using sensors. And we'll show a couple of examples. So sensor data, if you are short of data or you need better data quantity, could be a way to gather that data. So for example, Saildrone, they decided they needed more data. They actually put drones in the ocean to go and collect information about the air, what was happening on the surface, how that interaction was taking place, temperature changes that were occurring. And so they have all these Saildrones out there collecting data, collecting information by using all these sensors. They also leverage satellite data. So a lot of people ask us, why are you investing in space? We have a lot of problems here on Earth. Well, a lot of that investment in satellite imaging provides data so that we can solve big problems here on Earth. Imagine the data. I've got a company using it for agriculture, transportation, insurance. So all that data can be gathered and used in all kinds of different ways. So as we focus today on data, we'll be talking about data-led migration. That's what we call it, data-led migration. Faster velocity of a migration than an application, higher customer sat typically. But it's not just about getting your data to the cloud in a data lake. It's really about being able to use that data with analytics, visualization, or artificial intelligence. That's where the real power comes. So as we walk through today, we've got some different guest speakers, and what we're going to do is walk through kind of these 4 stages. So the first one is deciding about a data lake. Is that where you want to, use or leverage? And then all the elements of that data lake, security and management, how you do your tagging, how you're going to build that infrastructure up. Once you have the data in that data lake, then it's about the analytics you need to use or want to use, and then the visualization and that final step, visualization, machine learning, et cetera, that you need to leverage as well. So we'll walk through each of these steps. Again, we only have an hour. We have whole presentations on each step, but this is what we'll use today. I also want to let you know that we do have programs in place. I know a lot of you use and leverage partners to do your migration. You know, over 70% are driven today by partners, all the work that you're doing in data. And so we have mapped out a best practice for your partners, or if you are a partner today, to help them around this data-led migration. So we have best practices around assessing your data for that data strategy, building that business case, then building the project plan or mobilizing what you need to do in order to build that, and then how you might migrate and modernize that. So we have a lot of businesses that will say, I know my data today is in SQL Server, let's say Microsoft SQL Server on premises, but when I take it to the cloud, I want to put it in a cloud database. Or you could choose to leave it in SQL. So you could either migrate SQL or migrate and modernize, maybe move up to something like Redshift, for example. So these are the 3 phases and the 3 steps that we have. So migration of that data is really important. So what I'd love to do now is introduce Ranil, who's from VMware. You saw we had a couple of big announcements yesterday with VMware, and he's going to talk to you about some of the great work that VMware does in this space. He is the Vice President for Solution Architecture and Engineering. It's probably one of the smartest guys that I know. So please give a warm welcome from Ranil. Oh, you're going to use this?
Yeah.
Okay, let me grab this.
You have the clicker?
I do.
Thank you.
There you go.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sandy. So, as Sandy said, you know, data is the new oil. Of course, it's valuable, but if unrefined, it's of not much use. The amount of data collected is growing exponentially, but it's not just the volume. It's also the types of data. We see structured data, which is your traditional databases, unstructured, which is your video clips, images, sound clips, and then also the semi-structured data, which are your important traces and logs. And this is exacerbated by the acceleration of edge computing and the Internet of Things. As data scientists develop new models and algorithms as the foundation for their mission data needs, it's becoming really important that you know, agencies learn how to use this data, regardless of where those data sources reside. But due to the adjacency of these data sources, agencies struggle to get maximum benefit and value out of this strategic asset. It almost requires what the industry calls a data infrastructure layer, which is basically a combination of software components, tools, and services that are used to access, manipulate, and utilize this data. But how do you enable that when you have your data sources residing in on-premises data centers, on the edge, and in the cloud? Currently, there are over 85 million workloads running, actually north of 85 million workloads running on VMware within enterprises. And of that, we see that over 40% of those workloads are linked to some sort of database, high-performance computing, or analytics applications. VMware Cloud on AWS GovCloud is a unique partnership between VMware and AWS that provides a fast and easy pathway for customers to leverage public cloud infrastructure such as AWS and related services. This allows customers to move their workloads quickly to the cloud and then leverage the high-speed elastic network interconnect between VMware Cloud on AWS and AWS to leverage best-of-breed services such as S3 storage. It could be AI/ML services such as SageMaker or Athena. It also increases speed to value. And you can do all this without refactoring or replatforming your applications. For example, customers that are developing data models on premises can now leverage AWS's global footprint, offered, and also the offered services that are very helpful for getting insights out of this data. The use of VMC on AWS offers customers simplicity and speed, as they don't have to make changes to workloads or its configurations. It also provides unique enterprise capabilities, such as stretch clusters and multicast. It's not just layer 2 stretching, and that's the most technical thing I'm going to use today, but also it allows for cross-availability zone stretching that really allows you to create that data infrastructure layer that we talked about. While the actual speed of moving workloads is dependent on the memory footprint, size, bandwidth, and the activity on the VM during runtime or during migration, we typically see that it's 46% faster to migrate to the cloud with VMware Cloud on AWS. One customer example moved almost 2,000 workloads in just one weekend. We see that with business-critical applications like Microsoft SQL or Oracle databases, that the impact of data gravity goes up exponentially as applications are modernized once they're in the cloud. The more they consume AWS services such as SageMaker, Athena, and S3, additional data-intensive workloads drag into VMC on AWS. So just to recap, VMware Cloud on AWS, there are no changes required to skills, tools, or operating environments, proven enterprise performance, reliability, and security, speed and simplicity of migration with no changes to workload configurations, and with unique enterprise capabilities such as cross-availability zone stretch clusters that reduce cost and time to value. And now, VMware Cloud on AWS GovCloud is FedRAMP High certified, so you can use it with confidence that it's secure. Sandy, with that, pass it back to you.
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much. Sorry, they told me to break a leg before I came, so I took them literally. Thanks, Ranil. Really appreciate that. And I wanted him to come and speak because I know a lot of public sector customers that we work with have a lot of VMware. So I wanted to make sure that you guys know your VMware data can be used and leveraged here as well. Because cloud data lakes are the future of what we're seeing in the marketplace today, a data lake is a little different than a data warehouse, but a data warehouse and a data lake are very complementary. So a data lake has a centralized repository. It could have unstructured or structured data. So it does not require structured data to be a part of the data lake, which is one of the real values that people see today in a data lake. All of that data can be used then to be fed into machine learning. In fact, I see Abby here on my team. We just worked with Palantir that does a lot of data integration, and we were able to integrate SageMaker into Palantir so that the data can flow automatically into your machine learning models, which is a real power of having a data lake. And then you can get access within a second, or seconds, I should say. It was really funny because we had a dinner last night and I was talking to a couple of folks in agencies, and they were saying that speed of access to data is really important in several different applications. So you got really powerful performance when you go to a data lake as well. Now, some customers will ask me, especially in public sector, can I just leave my data on premises and have all my applications in the cloud? So there are some strategies that you might want to do that, but having the data in the cloud is very secure. We have a whole presentation on the security of that data, and it also helps you with that latency of data to get that performance up, having that data in a data lake. So as you look at it, there are lots of data lakes out there. I wanted to point this one out. I don't know if you guys saw it. If you're in healthcare, this is one specialized announcement that we made. We actually built a data lake specifically for healthcare. And the power of that is it's got built-in domain analytics, so you can specifically look at best practices for driving analytics. It has out-of-the-box HIPAA eligibility, and then it enables you to more quickly take your data types and your data sources directly to the cloud and a data lake as well. We are working on others of these. Again, we're going to work backwards from what you need and desire. We're already talking about a healthcare, looking at what else we can expand out for healthcare, but other areas too, education, transportation, government, et cetera. So if you guys have needs, make sure you let us know, because now you know we use the data to drive our next set of products as well. So let's now flip over from a data lake, getting the data to the cloud, to talking about the data analytics. Data analytics are, obviously the goal that comes at the end of the tunnel once you get your data there. You have all this new insight, all this new value that you can provide. I wanted to share one story with you. We announced this at the conference on Monday. Electronic Caregiver has taken advantage of one of the new trends in healthcare, which is the metaverse, using augmented reality and virtual reality to present a virtual caregiver or virtual care that's out there. So it's kind of one step above telehealth or telemedicine. That's now about 30% of all healthcare investments that's made is telemedicine. The next megatrend will be around this metaverse concept. You can't really do this without a lot of data. And so Electronic Caregiver has been working with New Mexico State to gather data for over 2 years, built a data lake so that they could now train their machine learning models and their AI. But instead of me talking about it, I'd like to play the video so that you can see what it looks like as well. Can I have volume on the video, please? It looks cool even though there's no video. But this is Addison. She's a virtual caregiver. So she's been built leveraging all that data and then having that data feed into artificial intelligence and those machine learning models. And this is the CEO of the company. And what he talked about, they used Amazon Poly and Amazon IoT Core, the IoT, to gather all the data. So for example, they found that men and women fall differently when they get older. And so, women fall forward, men typically fall backwards. So if you're wearing an IoT, bracelet, a sensor on you, they can actually warn someone before they fall that you're getting ready to have a fall based on knowing that data and that insight. Lots of great customers here. Mississippi Hospital System has leveraged this particular type of virtual care to reduce the number of hospital readmissions by 47%. Again, using the data from the data lake into analytics and machine learning. Sorry you couldn't see or hear that, but I will definitely have that posted up so you guys can see it, because it's really mega cool, I have to say. So there are so many data lakes and analytics out there. AWS has the most. I just kind of tell you that so that you know that we have a lot of experience and a lot of use cases in this space. So if you're looking for a great best practice, we probably have it. We can apply commercial best practices to public sector, but we have lots of public sector best practices too. I say that only because I know a lot of public sector customers can't share their reference. But if we know what you're trying to do, we can help you gain something that's really close in some part of the world for sure. And analytics can be used in any domain that exists out there. So if you're looking at, education, there's lots of ways you can drive analytics there, state and local government, federal government, you name it. So I wanted to show you just one quick example and then have Beth Ann come up and speak to you. I love this one because this is about City of Virginia Beach, where they were trying to avoid some of the damage and pre-warn people about flooding and different things that are occurring. And so they built a data lake from public and private data. So I attended a session yesterday that 4 customers leveraged and talked to us about how public and private data going into a data lake to really build strength of that data source and quantity is really powerful. And that's what City of Virginia Beach did. They leveraged data that they had gathered from sensors, but they also used data from the public to build and supplement that data, and then leverage analytics to provide warnings about flood zones and what's going on in the weather in that specific region. It's a great use case for how data can be put in a data lake and then used for analytics. But analytics is so powerful. I would like to invite up now Beth Ann, who is the Global Vice President for North America for Splunk, one of our partners. They specialize in data, and in particular, data analytics. Beth Ann?
Yes, thank you very much, Sandy. It's great to be here with you all today. So I am a recovering CIO. I bet you've never heard that before, but I used to work in government. Spent 11 years working for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts at both the agency level and running the shared services data center for the Commonwealth. So I spent a lot of time answering calls that my application's running slow, but you've never heard that before. And it's impossible. Data was the key to helping me figure out where the problem was. And back in the old days, right, everybody would come to the table with their logs and sit around the table and look at them and say, it wasn't me, must have been somebody else, must have been the network, must have been security. So those were my biggest challenges. I felt like I was constantly fighting fires and could never get to a point where I could be proactive about solving any problem related to the mission of government, right? I needed to get out of the reactive game and spend more time with agencies trying to understand how we could help them innovate to provide more constituent services. So I've been at Splunk for 9 years now, and it's definitely a long time in Splunk world, but I came because I learned that Splunk could really help any data center leader or any application leader really solve these performance challenges. And really the way that Splunk is able to do that, and we used to talk about being able to search, investigate, alert, and automate on your data. And making it very easy to get your data from any machine into a single repository, but then applying analytics to be able to search that data and discover patterns. And the more patterns you discover with machine learning, the more you can start to alert on those patterns and discover what's normal and not normal. And when something's not normal, that's when you really want to know about it, right? How do you eliminate the noise? Only tell me where the problem is so that you can really start to investigate where the true root cause of the problem is. And as Sandy pointed out, as we move into the cloud world, where there are more and more data sources, and it's even more complex to be able to have a service level view of any service in your organization and understand all of the components that contribute to that service to be able to alert and automate any response to a problem. And once you can automate, well, then you can really innovate and spend more time on that. So we really want to focus on helping agencies get to that innovation standpoint and use the data. I think once you start to look at solving all of your IT problems, then people start to discover, well, all of the data is already there. I can also understand caseloads for a social worker or foster care placement or trends and adoption. Again, I come from the child welfare world, so these are the things I know about. So we want to get to a point where we're really leveraging the data for many different use cases, putting a different lens on all of that data, and helping you learn and automate. We have a customer in FINRA. FINRA is a regulatory. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. This is, I talked about getting all the machine data in for all of your applications and all of the service level view that you can use to take action on your data. So in terms of the FINRA case study, FINRA is a regulatory authority that manages stock market transactions. Over 100 billion transactions a day are managed by FINRA, and they moved 170 applications to the cloud. And with Splunk, they were able to start to look, they access a lot of AWS services, Kinesis, CloudWatch. So they wanted to figure out how they could leverage all of that data and start to do more capacity planning and start to predict workloads and help them build a cost model and plan around how they could manage all of their costs tied to the cloud. In addition, they wanted to, cybersecurity was very important to them, so they wanted to take a look at all of the cyber elements to that data to make sure that they could prevent any data loss and start to be more proactive about their risk profile and ensure application availability and customer satisfaction. So really we're trying to get to the point where we're leveraging data as an asset, like Sandy talked about again, and helping everybody innovate in government to solve real world problems, whether it's in IT or in the business. Splunk wants to help you on your data journey, and we recently are authorized for IL5 on AWS, so I hope that you'll talk to us about your next stage in your data transformation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy.
Okay, so thank you. Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. So you heard from VMware about migrating the data, and then Splunk talked a little bit about the analytics as well. I thought some of these case studies would be great for you guys to look and leverage. But I know probably many of you are using data as a means to get to the end, which is your machine learning. And our goal is to get machine learning in the hands of every programmer that's out there, every developer, and every data scientist, because we do believe that this will revolutionize everything that we do in public sector. And there's lots of reasons why we believe that. There's so much power in artificial intelligence, yielding faster decision making, a decision that can be learned over time so it adjusts specifically. It can be used to add capabilities to product, to understand more about what your citizens are looking for, and even to discover net new ideas. Let me give you a couple of examples of this, because I thought this was really, some really great areas. So this is around a smart intersection, and this is done in Canada. Actually, I see Jody here from our Canadian team as well. This is MyoVision, and so they have been leveraging sensor data, so data that comes in across all different areas. They stream video in with that sensor data in order to alert when they have slower traffic, faster traffic, and how they can really manage that traffic patterns better for citizen satisfaction. It really helps to regulate the traffic flow. So first they have to get all the data in from the sensors, but then as they're regulating traffic, their learning models are learning to develop the right sense of algorithm in order to drive, no pun intended, drive the best results for their customers. Now, for machine learning, it's really crucial that we have good diversity on our teams in this. And it's just not a nice to have, it really helps to eliminate a lot of the unconscious bias. So as you're training your machine learning model, if your team looks all the same, you're not going to get all those great questions and different thoughts and ideas that go into training a machine learning model. This is a huge topic today, a huge topic of research, a huge topic of debate to make sure you have the right teams. So one of the things that we announced here at the conference on Monday is a AI and ML programming challenge. And we're doing this for diverse teams around the world. And what we're looking for is, in partnership with RoboCity, Python, and this 360 network, is to ensure that we have enough diverse skills that are out there for your data scientists, for your data strategists in the market, so you don't end up with that unconscious bias built in. The other big trend here is ESG. You probably have heard a lot about it at the conference. I just saw 2 mega reports that just came out from analysts on environmental, societal, and governance. It's really impacting countries, governments, agencies around the world. So if you think about environmental, everyone is looking at analyzing with data sustainability. Societal, they're looking at that diversity. People are actually, looking to see how diverse your teams are. And then on the open governance piece, are you using explainable AI? So one of the examples that I love to use here is explainable AI is about explaining how you got to the answer, even though the computer used your data to create the answer. And at DARPA, one of the things that they were looking at, they had done like everything by the textbook, by best practices, adding in the data, looking at the machine learning models, and then they would spit out the answer. But there were lots of questions. How did the computer come up with that answer? How do I know that's the right answer? Who actually recommended it? Who loaded the data? And so like many agencies around the world, everybody's now looking for what they call XAI, explainable AI. And that really means you take the same steps to get the data in and analyze the data, but your machine learning models are no longer black boxes. You actually have to explain how the computer got to the answer. This is really hot right now in healthcare, especially for doctors. Doctors want to know, how did the computer take all this data and say, oh, this is what you have? They want to see the logic that's behind it. And so explainable AI also fits into this new focus on ESG in this space as well. So this is another great example. I know we have a lot of folks here who look at transportation. This is in New South Wales. And they loaded 42 million train schedules, 349 different experiences that people had on buses as their data. And now they're using that with machine learning to provide insights about how they can provide better transportation options in the city. When should they run buses or trams or trains, or how do they regulate what happens with the car systems that are going on? Leveraging that data in that specific space. So what I wanted to do now is to bring up my last speaker to really discuss data gravity and how that's being used in the real world as well. So what I'd like to do now is have Howard come up. Howard is the general manager with Databricks Federal. And Databricks was one of our data-led migration partners of the year. And we're going to have just a quick fireside chat. Do you want to grab the
clicker?
The clicker. And you have a mic on, right?
I do.
Okay. So why don't you come over here and join me for a second? So why don't you introduce yourself and give us a little bit of information about what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Howard Levinson. I'm the general manager, as you said, for the Databricks Federal business. I've been with Databricks for about 6 years, but I've really spent my whole career solving big data problems on behalf of the federal government.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. So 30 years, did you say 30?
More than 30.
Wow,
I'm
so
embarrassed to say how many.
So you started very early on then, right?
As a teenager.
As a teenager. So what do you see as some of the biggest opportunities in public sector around data-driven initiatives?
Yeah, when you think about public sector, the whole goal of government is protection of the people. And there's so many opportunities to protect our citizens through better use of data. There's also, so I think that's clearly one of the biggest opportunities. I think the other really big opportunity is there's so much fraud that goes on in our tax system, in our Medicaid system, in so many different ways. And there's so many ways to make the government more efficient by eliminating some of that fraud. So those are the opportunities. The challenges are that the government's been one of the longest purveyors of information technology. And so there are legacy systems out there. And these legacy systems, I think OMB did a study in 2018, there were 6,000 federal data centers. So now if you want to make sense out of your data, we all know, and you said it earlier, you've got to bring that data together. More data provides better predictions. So you've got to take all of that data, you've got to federate it together, but before you federate it, you've got to normalize it. I've got to have consistency of the data so that I can start to do analytics on it. And that's frankly the biggest challenge for the federal government today.
Interesting. Probably the biggest challenge overall too, not just in the federal government, I think. Why don't we talk a little bit about some of the differences between application migration and data migration?
Yeah, I think on the data side, many of the agencies that I work with have, dozens of data sets that are absolute truth. They have different databases. These have evolved over the years, and they'd like to federate these together. So in order to do that, you've got to these are operational data stores. They run their business off of these operational data stores. But if you want to do long-term analytics on that data, you've got to get the data out of these operational data stores and, as we discussed, federate it. Now, how do I do that if these things are being updated all the time? So there are techniques that people use and that we use at Databricks called change data capture, where you're actually tapping these operational data stores and you're migrating that data into the cloud and normalizing that data as you migrate it at the same time. And so what you end up with, ideally, is a curated data lake with consistent set of schema and a consistent set or normalization of the data. Once you're there, it's much simpler to do the analytics. And as you said, it's really critical to make sure that you're setting the quality of that data. So there are techniques that we use at Databricks to actually assess the data as it's coming in and say, well, does that date meet the range that we expected it? Did that name have the schema that we expected it to have? And if it didn't, you can quarantine that data or you can reject that data. So what you really want at the end of the day is a data lake that is not a data swamp. And that happens very frequently.
Interesting. And why is normalizing so important?
Yeah, it's really critical if, the example that I always share with my mother, I'm sure everybody here would appreciate, is if you've got a database that has a column for first name and another column for last name, and then you have another database that has name, there's no way to join those data sources and really enrich the data unless you have consistency there. And so probably the biggest use case of Databricks in the federal government today is a technique called entity analytics, where you're trying to figure out, are these people the same? Are these widgets the same? So that I can take all of these disparate data sources and actually bring them together and enrich the data set and make it more valuable.
Thank you. That's a great way to explain it. I really appreciate that. So how has pursuing a data-led migration led to changes in your customers' behaviors?
Yeah, so it's really been fascinating. We work with an agency called USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. They have a really critical mission. They're responsible for implementing the US migration and immigration strategy. And that strategy is there to protect us all, make sure that only people that should be authorized to come into the country can. They had really big challenges. They were taking these data from these operational data sources that we talked about earlier, and it would go through this transformation to normalize it, but it was a very brittle process. It would fail very frequently because they didn't have the ability to set these expectations that I described earlier. And what would happen is they were responsible for reporting this data to the executive branch and to many others, but the data might have been a day or two old because the ETL process failed in that process. The data sets that they were getting also were just becoming larger and larger and becoming unwieldy for a data warehouse. So Databricks got involved. This goes back probably 3 or 4 years ago. They were one of our first big clients. And very quickly, we migrated in less than a week 2,000 different tables over to the cloud. We migrated it into Amazon S3. And from there, we were able to accomplish joins of data sets that they had never been able to do before. And so now that's evolved into a near real-time database that's almost always up to date, so their reporting is more accurate. But what's even more important is 90% of the data that people have is not structured. So if you really want to take advantage of your data, like if you're making decisions based off of your data warehouse or reports that come from it, you're only using 10% of the data. So if you can use 100% of the data, imagine how much more insight you can get. And USCIS conducts interviews for immigration. All that is natural language processing. Now they're using Databricks to analyze all of the interviews, see how the questions and the answers are changing, ensuring that they have the right quality of all of these interviews. They're, one of the biggest challenges they have is they set up these interviews thousands per day, and people no-show. Imagine the productivity impact for the interviewer when people don't show. Well, why are they not showing? Is it their distance from the location? Is it the day of the week? Is it the day after the Super Bowl? They didn't know. And now we're able to do predictive analytics on that and dramatically reduce the number of missed appointments, improving the efficiency of the organization. They're even using when you submit your information for a visa, you submit a documentation, a passport, a license, as proof. A lot of those are fraudulent. They use Databricks to do visual analytics on those, and we're able to help them identify which ones of those are fraudulent. So think about it now. They're using visual data, they're using natural language processing, they're using geographic data, geospatial data, all to improve the way USCIS conducts its business. And I think it's really been transformative for them, and it's been great to be on the journey with them.
So I think this is a great case study. I mean, you've increased the number of data sources for them. They've given them more access to more people, right? I mean,
Yeah.
We talked about 7,000 now data analysts can use the data,
Yeah.
and now they've got all this real-time decision. So what's your tweetable tweet about the power of a data strategy combined with analytics and potentially machine learning?
The value is in the data. And you've got to find a way to harness all of the data that an organization has in order to provide these predictive insights and anomaly detection and really make these machine learning models accurate and powerful.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Howard.
My
really
pleasure.
appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. That's okay. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully now what you've seen VMC, Splunk, and Databricks talk about their use and leverage of data in all kinds of government agencies. I try to cover, healthcare, federal government, state government, transportation, education, basically everything that you guys do. I was trying to give you some examples throughout the day. So what I want to leave you with, I want to leave you with 3 core things to take away. One is make sure you have a data strategy, and that data strategy is not siloed, that it is in sync with your business strategy. I want to make sure that you have a plan to migrate your data to a data lake and maybe a data warehouse, and then use that data with analytics, machine learning, AI, and use IoT to supplement that data. If you want help, we'd love to help you with any of those. And part of the reason we're doing this initiative as a partner-led initiative is right now we have so many people looking to do this today, and we believe that our partners have extreme value in this space. That's one reason I had 3 different partners come up and talk to you about how they've helped customers, because we do rely on them, and I know that you rely on them as well. I hope this was helpful for you. I'd be happy for you to reach out to me either today or via email or social media, however you want to get in touch with me, if you have questions about how we could help you around your data and analytics strategy. And as always, in all of these events, we would love for you to complete the survey. We are doing tours of this around the world, and we want to get better and better. Part of Amazon Leadership Principles is that we constantly raise the bar. So we'd love any feedback, do more of this, less of this was really valuable. dive deeper here. So make sure you complete the session survey as well. Thank you so much for being an AWS customer or an AWS partner, and we are here to help you. We're here to serve. Thank you so much.